Pankaj Jain, one of our candidates for the Jain Studies position. And he is currently assistant professor at the University of North Texas. And his PhD is from University of Iowa in religious studies, but he's currently has a joint position in anthropology and religious studies. And he teaches courses on Hinduism, Jainism, Bollywood films and religions, ecology and religion of South Asia, among other subjects. And his recent book is called Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities, Sustenance and Sustainability, and many other articles. So I will stop there and enjoy our guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this gracious introduction. I'm really happy and really enjoying my day here. It has been a hectic back-to-back meetings day, but I'm really enjoying the greenery and the lush green colors that I'm seeing, the sunny Florida that I've always heard about it, but I am experiencing that. So thank you for the warm welcome and all the hospitality. My presentation today is going to focus on one of the ancient Indic, probably world religions, Jainism, which goes back as far back at least as Hinduism. There were always these two parallel streams. Hinduism, which is now the word Hinduism and Jainism, there were no such words at that time. The Vedic tradition and the Shramana tradition, these two parallel traditions have been running as parallel flow of two rivers from last at least 3 millennia in South Asia, India, again a modern name, but South Asia or Bharat as we might refer to them. So my presentation mostly is going to focus on Jainism only because this is the endowed chair for Jain studies. So I'm hoping to focus on Jainism today. But my larger research so far has been on Hinduism, Jainism overlap, and Dharma as a generic term which cuts across many boundaries of Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, and how Dharma can contribute or has contributed to saving some of the whatever remaining ecological resources are there in India at present. How is Dharma helping or not helping, or has helped or not helped? So far has been my research has been on that general South Asian Indian culture and ecology. Today is on Jainism. The subtitle is from my recently published article also on Huffington Post, the dharmic method to save the planet, and in Jainism's context, non-violent method to save the planet. As Dr. Martin Luther King once quoted, that Jesus gave us the spirit, but Gandhi gave us the method to practice nonviolence. So that method is what is important if we want to save the ecology, if we want to save the natural resources. Just the spirit is great first step, but we need actual method to really implement those things. Otherwise, the planet is already in grave danger. So what are different methods that Jainism can contribute? A general overview is introduction, as probably I'm already doing, the Jain philosophy, some snippets, some glimpses into Jain philosophy, not a whole lot, but some glimpses, and some eco-examples in Jain tradition in the history and also in contemporary times in India and here, and Jains today in here and in India, and then final closing, and then again the quote that I just cited. So there are some scholars who have made these connections. There are already connections between Dr. Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. As we know, Dr. King himself went to India. He lived there in Gandhi's monasteries for a couple of weeks, and then he came back and brought that inspiration back here and launched his nonviolent civil rights movement. But Gandhi's inspiration also comes from not ahimsa or nonviolence was not Gandhi's invention, of course. That comes from Indic traditions of Jainism for the most part, and Hinduism, overlapping of those two traditions. So that connection, soul force means the satyagraha. So some questions that I want to raise in the presentation and hopefully get to the answers to those questions as well. What is the contemporary Indian environmental situation at present? What is the situation of environment in India? What is the contribution of Jain cosmology and ethics towards the nature, ecology? And what are the Jain worldviews and contemporary theories? Can there be a comparison or some connections between the modern ecological scientific theories and Jain worldview? And finally, Jain response to the environmental issues. These are some of the broader questions I'll be touching upon. So in line with, some of you are already familiar with Jainism, so I can say this, that in line with Jainism's Anekant many-sided reality, one side of reality of Indian situation, environmental situation is this, that Indian forests are under great assault. The land forests are being lost. Industrial pollution is similar to Pittsburgh in 1940s. Urbanization is going sprawling across India, large-scale projects, and people are being displaced from villages to land of nowhere, essentially, because they don't get rehabilitated properly enough. The river is polluted. Rivers are being polluted at a large scale in many, many Indian cities around the subcontinent, similar to Ohio's river in 60s, and population explosion and consumerism. But then again, the second side of reality is that it may be the 80-20 problem of the world, that 80% of the resources are always consumed by 20% of the world's population, and 20% of the population only get 80% of the resources. So it's an unbalance in our consumption habits in the Western world that causes these environmental disasters, because the forests are being cut for shining, lush tables that we have everywhere in the Western world. And just an example, and there are more cars and so on. So that's one way of looking at Indian environmental situation. Second way of looking at, again, second side of reality is this, that the National Geographic survey, the National Geographic magazine, has been doing this survey for the last 3 years to measure the green index of each major country in the world. So Brazil, India, China, Japan, Russia, US and UK, and many other countries across the world. And for the last 3 years in a row, India has been selected as the greenest country in the world. I don't think we have Wi-Fi connection here. I could have shown you the green index map as shown by this magazine, National Geographic magazine, one of the highly reputed magazines. What in the measure that they have are across 4 lines. If anybody goes to Indian cities, probably we will be shocked that how can India be called as the greenest country in the world with all the population and pollution and so on that we see all sides of India. But the way they have measured are these 4 criteria, right? The housing, transportation, food, and consumer goods. So these are the 4 major areas. If we add the 4 these parameters that magazine has concluded 3 years in a row, that Indians are still the greenest people in the world. Why? Because housing in India, for 99% of the people in their houses, there is no air conditioning, there is no central heating facilities, their water needs are still very low, dwelling sizes are still very small, and appliances are barely visible in most houses. So carbon footprint is at the lowest level in terms of the entire population, 1.2 billion people living in India, and their net carbon footprint is much less compared to this country, for example. Transportation, the ownership rates and average use of motorized vehicles is still very less. Length of daily commutes, so most commuters are doing public transport or sharing their rides or so on. So again, carbon footprint is really low, and public transport is the way to go, because there are not enough roads for all the cars to be driven, especially in the morning rush hours. And many people still do bicycling. Here is maybe a hobby, but there it's a basic need. That's the only thing that people can afford. So automatically carbon footprint again is very low. Third is the food, and here is what it connects with Jainism really strongly. That 1.2 billion people I mentioned, for 80% of those people, for the most part, are still vegetarians. They do eat meat. Some Hindus do eat meat but not like here, meat for breakfast, meat for lunch, meat for dinner. That's not the way people eat there, right? People do take meat, but maybe once a week, once a month. It's a special occasion, party meal, if they have to consume meat. So by vegetarian habits that they have, that again contributes to really less carbon footprint. And there are enough theories now to prove that carbon footprint and meat consumption is directly correlated. So that is where Jainism's that's what I will come back to Jainism, how it relates to. But let's look at the 4th parameter. Consumer goods, once again, the everyday consumption, the big ticket items is still very less, even though it's a growing economy, and the 4th parameter might change very fast, very, very soon in India as the economy grows. But as of now, they have limited their needs, their consumerism habits to a very minimal low. So this is probably the reason that they continue to be called as the greenest by that magazine. So what all this has to do with Jainism now? That some economists, until late 80s, when India was not growing enough or not growing at a faster pace like Japan or Singapore or Thailand or Malaysia, economists used to call that Hindus are very happy with what they have. It's a Hindu rate of growth. That was kind of a label which was applied to Indian rate of economy. But that Hindu, what exactly was that Hindu rate of growth? And if we hyphen that with Jain, the Hindu-Jain rate of growth probably gets reflected in the way the food habits are of most South Asians, even today, most Indians for the most part. That heavy influence of vegetarianism, which contributes to the lowest carbon footprint, was heavily inspired by Jainism. Jainism has the largest contribution to make Hindus, not overnight, but over centuries, they did become for the most part, they became vegetarians. Before the advent of Mahavir and Buddha, they were doing animal sacrifices in their rituals. They were consuming meat at a much larger proportion. But because of Mahavir's movement of nonviolence as the dharma, nonviolence is the religion. The one thing that distinguishes Jainism is the nonviolence. That nonviolence most clearly get reflected in their food habits. So this is where now we come to Jainism, the main topic of the presentation. So now let's look at more deeply what exactly is this Jain philosophy, what is so distinct about it, why nonviolence or vegetarianism became the hallmark of Jainism, right? So these are some glimpses into Jain cosmology, Jain philosophy. How Jains have imagined this universe is shown by that figure. That it's a figure of a person standing with his hand probably somewhere here, and that's the way they have imagined the universe. So the topmost portion that you see with 3 dots is where the liberated souls live forever. They live in infinite peace, infinite consciousness, infinite bliss. They live there forever. They're soul only. They're not in the body form. The center region, the thinnest region, is the earth region, where humans live, animals, and all the other living beings live. And the lowest regions are the 7 hells. Between the liberated region, which is probably I can point from here. So between this and this are the 8 heavens. So humans can rise up to live into heavens or hells, or they can directly go to the Siddhaloka if they get liberated. So this is the way the universe is imagined, was formulated by the Jain thinkers, including Mahavira. But all of the beings living in the universe are all connected because any soul can take any form, any species. A soul can be human or animal or plant or gods or demons or so on. So by that connection, the entire universe is now connected because a soul can undergo into any species. So all the species are part of the journey of a soul. So by that, the entire universe becomes almost like a family. It's the same chain of species going across these different births. So living beings, also most importantly, all the beings in the world, including the earth bodies, fire bodies, and air bodies, and wind, fire, water bodies, they're all living beings. No other tradition that I am aware of treats those beings also as living beings, including Hinduism. The water is not imagined as living, although there are some gods who are sort of connected with water in Hinduism. But here the very soul is imbibed into every single cell of water, according to Jain philosophy. The fire also, every spark of fire is imagined as living being. So everything is living. The only non-living things are six things, which probably I have not listed here. But the karma particles on souls are non-living. The idea of time is non-living. Idea of motion of rest and motion of medium of motion and medium of rest are non-living. Everything else in the entire universe is living being. So by that token, causing harm to anything, including earth, fire, water, and air, is violence. If you cause harm if you use more water than is needed, you're causing violence to water, to air, to fire, and to earth. So that is the sort of the most fundamental reason for Jains to be non-violent, so aggressively non-violent. We have seen aggressive violence, but here is an aggressive non-violence in practice. That focus on non-violence was then transpired into different non-Jain communities also, and that's why we see Indians as largely vegetarians and so on. Feel free to raise your hand, and don't be influenced by my speed. I can cut down my speed. If you have any questions, feel free to raise them. I don't have to wait until the very end. I've done this presentation many times. It's like part of my DNA now. So feel free to interrupt me. So once present is connected to somebody else past or future, because again, as I mentioned, the soul's journey through these different species. So that is the philosophy of Jainism. So Jain taxonomy now. So almost like Aristotle's classification of different beings, here Jains also had these classification in their mind. They imagined all the beings according to their senses. So one-sensed beings are the earth, water, fire, air bodies, and the nigoda, almost like the amoeba kind of particles with one cell, and they live in as a group, and the plants. So they all have the sense of touch only. They cannot have taste or other senses. Touch and taste, they have a lifespan of 12 years. The worms, leeches, oysters, and snails were classified into that category. So imagine this is 2,500 years ago with no biology lab, no microscopes, and so on. Still, they came up with these kind of categories, and there might be some inaccuracies, but we have to appreciate the thought and the classification method that they chose to practice and to theorize these things, even though, as I said, it's without any labs, right? So touch, taste, and smell was given 49 days with insects and spiders. So those are the beings in that category. Then touch, taste, smell, and see for 6 months. The average lifespan is 6 months, and those are butterflies, flies, and bees. So and then finally, of course, touch, taste, smell, see, and hear, sentient and non-sentient beings. Those are birds, reptiles, mammals, humans, gods, and demons. So which can be the worst kind of violence, which can be the least preferred kind of violence, which can be the little okay to cause violence. If we have to live in this world, we have to live by causing some minute form of harm to some beings at least. So which can be the preferred, little more preferred than less preferred? Would be that which is only one sensed beings, right? Thanks. So that's why most Jains, for their food habits, they must depend only on plants. The first category, they cannot eat earth, water, fire, or air, or rigoda, but they can eat plants. None of the other beings are acceptable by Jain food. So most Jains, even today, after 2,500 years since Mahavir came, they are still vegetarians. And that again got reflected into different other communities of India as well. So that is the reason for vegetarianism. But even under plants, you might ask that what about the plants which are root of a tree, for example, root of a plant, for example, the potatoes, onions, garlics, radish, and carrots. Those are all also prohibited by most Jains. They don't eat all those things, especially monks and nuns, of course. And I'm living examples sitting right here. And my own grandmother, for example, also had to. She never would take those things, carrots and radish. So most Jains are still practicing those things. And even to even one step further, they do not eat after sunset, for example. So because after sunset, being a tropical country, you might have insects and bugs flying all over, and you might have free food with your daily food. You might have those insects entering your food. So most Jains avoided eating after sunset. To that extent, they practice non-violence vegetarianism. So that's all those, I think, directly relates with ecology, that the topic for today. Just from one other perspective, the souls can be of two types: living, mundane, and liberated. The liberated are souls like Mahavira. Mundane are mobile and immobile. Mobile can be of 2, 3, 4, 5 senses. And one sense beings are earth, water, fire, air, and vegetables. And so that same chart in different form. Okay, then the 3 pillars of Jain philosophy, so to speak, are these 3 AAA. It's a AAA religion: Ahimsa, Aparigraha, and Anekantvad. AAA. Very easy to remember for undergrads, especially, right? So first A stands for Ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-violence, literally. A is just a way to negate a word, Ahimsa. Aparigraha, again a negative prefix. And Parigraha, non-accumulation, non-violence, non-accumulation. The third one is Anekantvad. Ek and Antvad means many-sided realities. There is no pen here, but I like to translate this as the third one, as plurality of realities, reality of plurality. Make sense? Both are same. That reality exists in pluralities is the biggest truth from Jain perspective. And what did I say? Plurality of realities, yeah. And reality of pluralities. So the only reality in the world is that we exist in plural perspectives. There is no one way only to any truth that we state. If we say that this is the only truth, we are really deluded by that one-sided dogmatism of our belief. So according to Jain perspective, then there are 7 perspectives for each. Anything that need to be stated has 7 perspectives. And once we combine all 7 perspectives, we get the wholesome reality. We get the final truth. So since none of us are omniscients like Mahavir, none of us have the full picture of the truth. So we are all having these partial realities. So we all must reconcile our perspectives to reach at the final truth. So how does that, I'm sorry, I'm starting from the other perspective, from third point first, I'll go back to first 2. How does that translate into ecology? If we apply Anekantvad or many-sided realities to environmental issues, what can that contribute to environmental issues? Any thought on that? Many-sided realities and environmental issues? There's a clue there, right there.
So it's okay to cut a tree and it's not okay to cut a tree?
No, if you want to save trees, so it's a non-violence. Non-violence goes hand in hand with that. The way to apply that into environmental issues is that to go beyond anthropocentric view, that only humans have the privilege to cut down the trees, and the perspective of tree is always ignored when we apply the human anthropocentric perspective. So that's the way to sort of translate that into environmental issues. And similarly, egocentric, that this is my, let's say, my tree or my land, and I will do what I have to do with the land. But land is also alive from Jain perspective. So to see from other nature's perspective, animals' perspective, different species may have different perspectives towards water, towards earth, towards plant, and so on. So to combine those things will be the application of Anekantvad for environmental issues. So that was the last one.
It's like nature's bill of rights.
Yeah, in a way, but the language spoken in India is not of rights, it's of duties, and virtues and duties. Rights sounds more sort of, in the word itself, there are some conflicts inbuilt into it. Why, if everybody follows one's rights, duties, rights are already taken care of. That's Indian perspective. That's Jain and Hindu perspective also. Second one in the middle was aparigraha, non-accumulation, which is, of course, is very easily translates into environmental issues. If we cut down on our accumulation, one car for entire life, let's say, to minimum, one spouse for entire life, one car for entire life, one set of furniture for entire life. If we cut down on our consumption, accumulation all automatically stops, and that automatically translates into environmental protection. To the extent, to give you an example of Jain monks and nuns, again, we have living examples here, they cannot own they can never touch any currency. They can never own a second piece of cloth. They can never ride on a car or a train or a plane. They must walk all their lives. So that is the extent of non-accumulation that Jainism has practiced. Jains have practiced for more than 2 millennia. Even for Digambar sect, for example, they cannot even own a utensil when they go out for begging. They must collect their food in their cupped hands. They must consume right there. So that is the kind of non-accumulation that Jains have inspired their lay followers also to practice, looking at these monks and nuns, for example. So that's the extent of non-accumulation that Jains have. Ahimsa, of course, is very easy for us to understand non-violence, greatest dharma for one's karmas. By practicing non-violence for ecology, automatically one's karma improves. One cuts down on the negative karma particles that are stuck to slow souls. So that's automatically protection for the environment, for the animals, for the trees, and whatnot. Any questions so far? Okay. What are the exact words of some of the Tirthankars, the great teachers of the Jain tradition? Tirthankar literally simply means ford maker. Ford is like a big congregation of monks, nuns, and lay followers. So every time a Tirthankar comes to this world, and every time cycle has 24 Tirthankars, 24 great teachers. Every time they come, they create these new congregations. That's why the name Tirthankar. 22nd Neminath, for example, 22nd was Neminath. So there are 24 Tirthankars for our time cycle. 22nd was Neminath. And the way his life connects with ecology is that his entire drive to become a monk, to become an ascetic, comes about when he was almost going to get married. And in his wedding party, he sees a huge list of line of animals being ready for being slaughtered. That starts his thinking process. He starts speculating on violence and non-violence, and he immediately stops his wedding, and he becomes a monk, and then eventually becomes a Tirthankar. So that violence towards animal was into his inspiration to become a monk. 23rd Parshvanath similarly also sees a snake being burnt by some Hindu Brahmin practitioner, and he immediately also gets inspiration and becomes a mendicant. So Parshvanath has a similar story as well. 24th, Mahavira, in his last breath, Mahavira, he sends his dearest disciple to stop a slaughter, again done by some Hindu Brahmin, and he sends him to stop this slaughter. So even in his last breath, Mahavir is thinking of animals and violence being done towards animals. So that shows how deeply these Tirthankars thought of animals and reptiles even, and in the way they lived their life. And these are some of the words translated into English from Prakrit, of course. Acharang Sutra, 242, 11, and 12. Trees are inherently valuable. Trees are not valuable for their materialistic gains. They have inherent value in themselves because of their beauty and their strength and all the qualities that they have. Like then another saying by Mahavir also is vegetation has life just as humans. So probably modern science recognized life in plants probably 100 years, within the last 100 years. These are words recorded 2,500 years ago, without any biological lab, of course, that trees and plants have life. That shows the unique contribution of Mahavir. Then other texts also, these sayings are spread in many texts. So souls render service to one another. Souls don't live, even though Jains have this concept of that every soul is distinct. They never merge into a super soul like the Hinduism's idea of Brahman. Even then, the souls are, although the souls are all distinct and separate, but they must all help each other throughout their journey of their many lives. So they all support each other. How should especially humans live in this world? Humans should live according to like the behavior of the bees. What do bees do? Bees collect the nectars of different flowers without causing any harm to the flower or the plant. And then they make this honey. So similarly, householders should, and of course monks and nuns already do that, but Jain householders should also live life like bees. They collect only that which is really absolutely basic, according to their basic needs. Not anything more than the basic needs is to be taken from the nature. That's how the humans should live. Forests are like saints, and one should plant more trees for positive karma. These are again statements from at least 1,000, 2,000 years old, long before any word of global warming or biodiversity or all of those words are very recent. But nature's concern for trees has been part of the Jain tradition for thousands of years, as we see. So those are all the sayings and nice words and nice examples in the tradition. What about the real life householders, the Jain householders? How have they been living? Have they followed some of these teachings, or they have stayed beyond those teachings? What we see in the real life examples of Jain householders, for example, is that in their professions, even today, they prefer to do professions which are most non-violent. So you will rarely, if ever, you will see a Jain being involved in a business or trade or any kind of profession in which cutting down of trees is involved. So I'm looking at the second list now. So you'll never see a Jain doing a sale of charcoal, coals, timber, for example. You may rarely see a Jain involved in animal trade or animal carts, that kind of business, or selling alcohol or consuming alcohol, very rarely. A slave trade, weapons trade, trade of poisons, or trade of sugar canes or seeds, trade of firearms, and even creating lakes by cutting down forests, for example. So you may never see a Jain doing those professions in real life. The anthropological examples you may never see. Then what do Jains live in? Why are Jains so rich? They are one of the richest, or probably the richest community in India. They are the largest contributor of income tax, for example, and sales tax in India. Why are they so rich? So they are rich because they have created their niche areas in their profession, in their businesses. What do? They do mostly trading, banking, commerce, clerical activities, all non-violent, for the most part. Traditional medicine they might do arts and crafts. They may serve to the government or the ruler, or they may be in manufacturing industries of textile and metals, for example. Again, mostly non-violent. Textile also, I just learned very recently that the textile plant has very short life. So as soon as probably the cotton seed is dead, after that the Jains will come and start using that for their industries. That's very recent, I've learned. Then publishing in media, that's because that is considered as part of the philanthropic work to educate the society. So these are the most preferred professions of Jains. You might ask, why alcohol? Why is alcohol bad for a Jain from the second list? Any guess? Any idea? Why didn't they like alcohol? And of course, the obvious reason that it's intoxicating. But the additional reason is that alcohol contains, from the Jain perspective, the tiny particles of nigoda, the one cell group of large number of one cell beings. So consuming alcohol is violence to your karma, in addition to the obvious reason. Yeah, please.
Can you explain the sugar cane and the seeds?
Sugar cane probably is the live seeds, and again, anything which is sweet collects a lot of these nigoda kind of beings. Group of large one-cell sensed beings. Same thing in alcohol and honey also. Did I mention honey? I should include honey as well. Alcohol and honey, same reason, that honey contains these one-sense beings. Yeah.
But is there any other sweetener that is used instead?
No, they do consume sugar, the householders, but they would like to, ideally they should minimize the consumption of sugar. But there is the chemical-based food is not really part of the traditional Jain or Hindu or Indian food. Not yet. It may be coming with GM food going to India. Yeah, you will see chemical sugar sweeteners, but not yet for the most part. Okay, so those are the reasons for you see, at least in practice, some non-violence in practice in their professions also. Even if they make millions and millions of rupees, they're very rich. But because of these niche areas that they've created across centuries, they've also been, because of trading business, they were in the western part of